Welcome to Women's World. I am Oinala Sali. Today we take a trip to Namibia, where women are suffering the most from the worst drought the country has experienced in decades. Then we bring you up to date with stories that have made the news in the world of women. Also on Life on Top, you get to meet a woman who sits at the head of the table when presidents gather. And on Trends, we seek to find the balance between beauty and pain. Remember that you can tweet at us at TVC Women's World or get in touch via Facebook at Women's World TVC News. We want to hear from you. Well, it's time for the issue of the day. Take a look at this.
All over the world, women and children continue to bear the brunt of any disaster. From war-torn Afghanistan, where United Nations figures reveals that the increased number of dead and injured civilians is made up of more than women and children, to Kenya, where women dig deep into the ground to find water for their family. The story is the same. Namibia, sub-Saharan Africa's driest country, is suffering from its worst drought in a generation. According to the United Nations, a third of the population is now severely food insecure, with women and young children being the worst affected. In the northern Kunene region, dry and dusty landscape are all that remains of what used to be vegetable farming fields. Kariamakuju Kauta lives in that region. She used to grow maize and always had an abundance of it. But now, due to the drought, she has just 1 week's worth of supply remaining.
We're hungry. That's the impact of the drought. That is what we can see. People are hungry. People are dying.
Helen Lekanda, Deputy Director at Directorate Disaster Risk Management, said all 13 regions in the country have been affected by the drought.
All the 13 regions are being affected with this drought. There is shortage of water for animals as well as for human beings. There is shortage of food. People did not harvest enough food in all the regions.
An estimated amount of over 100,000 children are at risk of malnutrition in the country.
We already know that Namibia is in a vulnerable situation in terms of nutrition, for example. 29% of children in this country are stunted, and stunting is irreversible. It means 29% of these children do not do well in schools. It means 29% of these children actually fall out of the system and even out of the so-called potential citizens of the country. So children and women are bearing the brunt of the drought.
UNICEF believes that there should be a collective effort between the government and the international community if the deaths of many women and children are to be avoided.
Namibia has been experiencing the cyclical challenges of drought and floods. So the government as well as the international community should really work hands in hands to really prevent the further deterioration of the climate change problem, resulting in natural disasters.
The organization says it needs about $7.4 million to support those people. Namibia, which won independence from neighboring South Africa in 1990, classifies as middle-income country, although a quarter of its 2 million people live in poverty. Mbeti Japosa, an elder in our Ovahimba community, said the lack of rain for the past 2 years has taken its toll on her village in the Kunene region.
From previous years, we never suffered from drought because we used to drink milk and eat whatever we wanted to. Now the drought is really affecting us.
While agriculture accounts for 5% of the economy, a third of Namibians are dependent on some form of subsistence farming. The situation in Namibia makes it an example, not an isolated case. According to UN Women, the challenges facing women are tough, no doubt, and only by protecting their rights and finding peaceful solutions to conflict can the continent continue to move forward.
To understand the reasons behind the plights of women during disasters, we spoke with Bridget Ezakwe, a member of the West African Network for Peace Building.
When we begin to look particularly at why this is so, or why women and children are more affected during disaster situations, we must first of all look at the situation of women and children pre-disaster era. And what comes to my mind quickly is about gender and roles. We are in a patriarchal system where the male determines everything, where everything is determined by the masculinity or femininity. And what I am trying to say here is that those roles that patriarchy has placed on our society have implications, grievous implications for women. And that is why they are reinforced during conflict, disaster situations. They are systemic structures that must be addressed before we can put anything aright. And for disaster, I said that strategic intervention should be designed. A framework that will consider the vulnerability of men and women and have adequate and appropriate intervention strategy as it affects men differently and women differently and children. And we have international standards that can guide us. We have international conventions, we have international resolutions that can guide us towards in doing that.
Now for the latest headlines on A Woman's World. Stay tuned.
The United Nations and its partners are setting up child-friendly zones in refugee camps in Congo's Goma, helping children there unite with their families. The agencies working in the camp are trying to make sure these children can have something of a childhood.
What we have done is negotiated with the camps that we have around Goma to have a space where children can be children, where children can play, where children can learn something.
The children can play games or learn skills like weaving and basket making as they play in the zone where they can forget the trauma they have suffered momentarily.
We get an average of 1,200 children in a day. Now, all these children are from different age groups.
One of the most important functions of these child-friendly spaces is helping the children who have been separated from their families to be identified and reconnected with their families.
92% of the children we've been able to register, we have been able to find their parents. Their parents are around Goma, but we do have children whose parents are very far or are in places that are not accessible to us at the moment.
Children are placed with temporary families until parents are traced, and if they are orphaned, the agencies will find a family to take them in. Working women in Afghanistan express worry over their future after foreign troops withdraw next year. They fear that opportunities to work and remain active in public life will scale back drastically.
With the gradual withdrawal of the international community from Afghanistan, I am concerned that Afghan women will lose the achievements they made so far. As we see every day, there is violence against women in Afghanistan. We were witness to government reducing the number of women sitting in provincial council, the reduced role of women in society. So I think post-2014 for Afghan women is a concern.
Habibi Jan, a widow with 6 children who works at a factory where military uniforms are sewn, called for continued support from the international community.
We demand the international community to continue assisting Afghanistan after 2014. We would like to have opportunity to go out for work. I am glad that right now, under the present leadership, I have the ability to work outside home. If God forbid the situation worsens, then the women will be the first victims to have to stay at home once again.
Since the overthrow of the Taliban in 2001, women have won back rights such as voting, education and jobs, although beatings, torture and forced marriages are still common. One of the victims reacts to the demolition of the run-down Cleveland house where 3 young women were imprisoned and tortured for roughly a decade. Michelle Knight, alongside Gina Duisu and Amanda Berry, all went missing from the west side of Cleveland between 2002 and 2004. They were discovered on the 6th of May. After neighbors heard Berry's cries for help, Knight was on hand for the demolition, handing out yellow balloons to onlookers and neighborhood residents.
Why it was important to be here today is because nobody was there for me when I was missing. And I want the people out there to know, including the mothers, that they can have strength, they can have hope, and their child will come back.
The raising came after Ariel Castro was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 1,000 years for the crime. Meanwhile, Castro remained alternately defiant and showed no remorse in a rambling final statement to the court.
Most of the sex that went on in the house, and probably all of it, was consensual. These allegations about being forceful on them, that is totally wrong.
Although he said he was sorry for his actions, he insisted that he was not amongst them.